The subtalar joint is a very different sort of joint in the body because it has two different angled surfaces. So one is convex and one is concave, whereas in the hip joint you would have only one side of the bone. One bone would have a convexity, a concave. Fuck me. Fuck. Come on, where are the words? Why can't I find the words? What is happening right now? I'm not just tired. It's not just tired. It's something else. What the fuck is happening right now? I'm getting that light fucking dizzy thing. Is somebody... Bio, what the fuck? The subtalar joint is made of basically two articulations or two separate joints. Now we're talking about the joint between the talus, the ankle bone, and the calcaneus, the heel bone. Now, as I've talked about before, the talus essentially rests on top of the heel bone with the front forward head of the talus hanging off a little bit. Now, the angle and shape of the articulations is opposite on each of those parts. So in the back part, which is also more to the side, the outside, the heel bone is going to have the hill-like surface or a convexity, and underneath the head of the talus, where we have the sustentaculum tali, it's going to have a valley-like shape or a concavity. So we're going to start with the hill-shaped part. So that's going to be the part that's more on the back of the heel bone and more to the outside. So in order to understand where that first shape of the joint is in your body, start by finding the back of your heel. And you're just going to trace up the center of your heel. Now that first joint surface is just in the same line as the center line of your heel. So it's just going to be up a little bit further from where you can actually touch. So you have to imagine this part. So I'm going to start by tracing up the center of the heel. And remember, the heel is a little bit on the outside of the foot. So that's what helps us see that this first articulation, this outside articulation of the subtalar joint, is a little bit to the outside of the foot. Now, to understand how that joint, that outside part of the joint is curved, it's actually the same curve as the back of the heel bone. So when you look at the heel bone from the side, and I can pull it away from the rest of the foot a little bit, but when I look at the heel bone from the side, if I were to draw a wheel or a circle inscribing the back of the heel bone, that first part of the joint is the same direction or angle. So that's going to be an image that we can use later when we're moving. But it's a good way to understand, okay, that's where and how that first outside articulation of the subtalar joint is. So start by tracing your heel, and I trace it from the bottom all the way around, and you can kind of draw that circle. It's not going to actually go, the circle, it's not going to go to the end of the heel bone, but it's actually going to go maybe about 2/3 of it. And then you can trace up the center of the heel. And you can think, okay, in that line, up the center of the heel, that's where this first outside articulation is. And then it's curving in the same circle as the back of the heel. So that means that the heel bone side of that joint is going to be, like a hill, and the talus side of that joint is going to fit on top of it. So it's very much like the top of the talus and the tibia, and actually this part of the joint is directly under that joint above. So it makes sense in that way as well. It's easy to visualize in that way, that we can think of the top of the talus and then the bottom of the talus, and then the heel bone connects under there. And then if I were back on top, the tibia would connect on top. So try touching the other leg. And you start with the back of the heel. And you think, okay, if that were a circle, that will be more or less the arc and line of that first outside articulation of the subtalar joint. And then draw up a line up the center of the back of the heel. And in that line, so we've done the curve, but now in that line in the center of the heel, that's going to be where that part of the joint is located in the body. It's going to more or less fall on that line. So using those two keys, or cues to guide you, see if you can image and begin to feel, okay, yes, here is the location and shape of the first part, the outside articulation of the subtalar joint. If you enjoyed this video, sign up for the InBody Space newsletter and share the link with a friend. You can also find original content on Facebook and Instagram.